Episode 3 of the Arknights anime just released last night, and I have a lot to talk about, so let's go ahead and jump into it. The first thing I gotta say is just from my own perspective, the VAs are doing a massive job of just giving us a real representation of how terrifying this stuff is. Like the medics screaming and just like having like they're about to lose their lives, like to have a catastrophe happen. Tallulah's fighting them, and if it wasn't for Emiya being able to kind of step in and block a lot of that damage, it's terrifying. And it's nice to see that this atmosphere is being built and the voice acting is doing such a great job of building it. Like it actually sounded like true horror and terror in her voice, and it was just so nice to be able to see that. Obviously not nice to hear because it's actually kind of, you know, blood curdling a little bit. It's kind of scary, but it's just nice that they're going so intensive on it and just making sure that this feeling is being represented in just kind of a nice way. Talking about some of the things that I may have wished I kind of seen a little bit more of, and I guess that's the Ace versus Tallulah thing. Obviously we know how that works if you've read the story. Very kind of like, hey, he's going out of the blaze of glory, he's making sure everybody gets out. You know, that scene with him and Guard was just kind of eye-touching, and it just it just makes you sad, man. Like, you know what happens if you've read the story, and if you didn't, you kind of can get an idea of what's going to happen there, as Ace is kind of on his final leg there, trying to make sure that everybody gets out, and he's kind of the last guy going against Tallulah. And unfortunately, that's sad, you know what I mean? So if you're looking at it from just perspective of somebody who's never watched or seen anything about Arknights, I can see how it can be a little bit like, okay, well, what happened to him? Is there going to be some sort of like foretelling? Is he going to come back or something like that? So maybe they're trying to have that mystery. So I'll kind of just leave it there in case like a next episode or something like that kind of touches back on it and kind of does a flashback or something to kind of give us a representation of that. Of course, if you read the actual lore, you probably know what happens. But overall, I think that transition was really nice. I think just having the Rhodes Island team defeated, man, like you could see it in their face structure that it's just like, wow, this was like a massive hit to the team, and this is just going to have such an impact moving forward. I think it's a really nice scene with some of the things with Doctor. It seems like they're trying to fit into their own. I really kind of like the idea that they're not necessarily just a self-insert here. It really seems like there's some sort of like growth that can happen with the Doctor, and they seem to be kind of going in their own path and kind of seeing like which way they want to do. We're starting to see a little bit more of their motives, whereas the Doctor that we play in this story is a little bit like more in the back scenes doing stuff, like very strategical, obviously, and you can see that in the anime as well, but just kind of in the back doing stuff. And there's a lot of stuff that we can't really see that Doctor's doing or kind of has a hand in a lot of the times until like the big moment, the final reveals and stuff like that. So it is a little nice to be able to see Doctor exchanging words, conversation and stuff like that, and just having these pieces of dialogue that just gives them a little bit more of a personality, if you will. And that's just kind of what I think the anime was going for, which is really nice. Aside from that though, the scene and when they got to Rhodes Island was so nice. First off, just seeing the land ship, seeing how massive this thing is, and just being able to see everybody in like the cantina and stuff like that. So I talked about this a little bit in Discord. If you are a person who knows about Rhodes Island, you know all the lore and you know all the units and stuff like that, it's obviously going to be like, oh, there's Spot, there's, you know, I think Earth Spirit and stuff like that, Perfumer, Cicero, and all those people. Like, you're starting to pick out everybody you're starting to see. But even if you aren't familiar with those characters, I still think that was a really good scene. I think that was kind of nice just to see how lively Rhodes Island, and there's people here, there's people living here, they have like their lives and they're doing stuff. It's just a nice, really good scene. And I think the beat that it gave it, kind of like this chill vibe, was really nice. I think it was kind of this opening up. Even if you're not familiar with Arknights, you kind of get this idea of like, hey, people live here. This is a place that people care about and they represent. And even if you don't know the characters, it's just always nice to see, you know, everybody having a good time and stuff like that, especially after we just got done with such a huge, massive battle and devastating like sadness and depression and stuff like that for our current team. It's kind of nice to have that little bit of an upbeat into like the next kind of Rhodes Island area where you can kind of just see that, you know, these people are having a little bit, because they obviously don't know what happened, but it's just nice to see a little bit of niceness, a little bit of happiness, a little bit in the wake of terror right there. I'm also pretty satisfied with the pacing of these. I think they're just getting better at doing a very good job of just giving like, here's a bunch of action. Like at the beginning of this episode, bam, 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 bam. Like it was just nonstop action. They were doing stuff. That stuff was happening. Dude, just having like the catastrophe and Tallulah all happening at once, and Tallulah's like just reflecting things, and then you actually get to see basically how cold-hearted Tallulah is, not really caring about her allies there getting hit by the catastrophe. She doesn't care. And if you read some of the story, it's kind of like, damn, what made her get to that point? You know, it's just, it's nuts. And even if you're not familiar with the story and stuff like that, you kind of just look at her like, wow, she's just a tyrant, bro. She doesn't care about her allies. She doesn't care about nothing. She really is just like this tyranny that's just trying to take over whatever she's trying to do there. and it's just really terrifying to be able to see that. Just having the pacing of that action scene and then moving into like the Rhodes Island lore and just kind of explaining, going over like the Orgeanium and just seeing how massive that is, and talking about Orpathy, and just having like kind of this context of how Rhodes Island works and operates, and even the nomadic cities. We started talking about that and how Chinnabog is pretty much like on wheels and they do this to avoid the catastrophe, and now it gives you like an idea like, well, why didn't they avoid this one? What the hell was going on there? So now there's a plot within a plot, and you're trying to get an idea of like just what is kind of going on while getting a little bit of the lore, which I really appreciate that they're doing this stuff and just having these little increments in those little sections where they're just kind of mentioning how these cities work and how the Orpathy works or how the Orgeanium works. And it's just really nice to add it into these little layers so it's easily digestible for people who don't know much about Arknights. And it's just really nice looking at it from a perspective of somebody who just reads kind of the story, right? Because you can't really see the magnitude of how big these things are. Like the Orgeanium, massive things, massive stuff. And it's just nice to be able to see this animated and see like, oh, that's what it looks like. Damn, man, that's huge. Or just seeing like Tallulah being able to do her arts. I'm like, damn, she's that powerful. I knew it was kind of crazy in the story, but seeing it, wow. And the catastrophe, how threatening and like, you know, it's scary, bro. It's literally stuff raining from the sky, and just be able to see it is so awesome. So I think it's just a really good representation. I think they're doing a very good job of just mashing fan service for both people who have read the story and people who haven't. I think they're doing a very good job of intermingling this kind of stuff and just being able to kind of represent both sides of a fan base, basically, and just being able to showcase stuff that is very appealing to both sides of it. So I think so far this has to be one of the best episodes that I've seen from Arknights so far, and I think it just has a lot of good storytelling, layering, as well as action combat and stuff like that. So I was really impressed with this one. And yeah, that's all I really have to say with it. Let me know in the comments what you guys think moving forward and stuff like that. We'll be doing these reviews every week.